There were legitimate question marks about the cornerback room at the 40 acres after Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan both decided to hit the transfer portal. But with the addition of Jayvion Cole from San Jose State, I believe a lot of those questions have been answered.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now free on the Google Play Store or App Store. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, Texas gets a big pickup, not big in stature, but big in production, from Jayvion Cole out of the transfer portal from San Jose State, now committed to the 40 acres, mitigating the losses of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan. In the second segment, a bad loss yesterday for the Texas baseball team, but they have won 5 out of their last 6, 5 in a row prior to yesterday's game, hitting on all cylinders at the right time of the season. And in the last segment, Max Chadwick came on last week in my last episode, a lot of laughs, right? Of Locked On Longhorns from Pro Football Focus, just giving us gems on the orange and white game, his thoughts, his takeaways. And then the 11 players drafted a few weeks ago from the Texas Longhorns and their landing spots in the National Football League. So he came on for about 30 minutes, talked about that. Like I said, I provided a lot of gems. So I'm going to recap it at the end of today's episode for everybody that didn't get a chance to watch or listen to it. My 5 biggest takeaways from everything he said in my last episode of Locked On Longhorns. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, if you've listened to this podcast before, if you're an avid listener, if you've even heard it, maybe 5 or 6 times, you probably heard me say this before. But, one of my favorite quotes from Steve Sarkisian is adapt or die, right? Really, every time Steve Sarkisian says something, my antennas go up, because I think he's just a wise man and, somebody that I have a ton of reverence for, especially the way that he's resurrected my favorite college football program, right? So how can you not love Steve Sarkisian? But just a stand-up guy. And like I said, I feel like I learned a little bit of, from him every time he speaks at his press conferences or, just wherever he speaks, right? And one of the things he said last year around this time during the summer and the offseason was adapt or die. He said it on the Pivot episode, and it's just so true in this new era of college football with NIL and the one-time transfer rule. I'm not even sure if it's the one-time transfer rule anymore. Like, I'm pretty sure, now you could just transfer at free will, once per year. So, I mean, we're just in a new season, a new era of college football. Like, that just is what it is now, right? And it's not changing. And the best programs and the best coaches are the ones that have adapted to it, right? Adapt or die, right? That's been true in all aspects of life forever, right? If you want to win in college football right now, you have to invest in NIL and you have to attack the transfer portal at a high level, period, right? Like, there's no way around it, right? And if you choose not to do it, or you want to be stubborn, or you want to snub your nose up at it, that's fine. But that's going to affect the quality of your program, and you're going to get left behind. Adapt or die. And Texas has done a really good job of bringing in good players. They've coached these players at a high level, and they've developed these players at a high level. That's the biggest reason they're in the position they're in. But part of the reason they're in the position they're in and they look like one of the best teams moving forward is because they've attacked the transfer portal at a high level, and they've made a high-level investment in NIL, which has brought some really good football players to the 40 acres. Adapt or die. Steve Sarkisian has adapted. Texas looks really good right now and for the foreseeable future. And when you look at it, I thought, we've done such a good job, especially over the last year, when holes open up on this roster and when we have needs on this roster, they go out and attack them at a high level, right? And I think that over the last couple of weeks, cornerback became a position of need, right? Where you thought potentially you were going into the year maybe with this being a position of strength. It became a position of need over the last couple of weeks when Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan decided to hit the portal, right? And I thought that you needed to go out and get at least one player. We'll see, if they go out and get another one, but you needed to get at least one player to mitigate those losses, because those were 2 players that played at a high level for you last season. I know things didn't end well necessarily with Terrance Brooks. Spring game didn't look good, but, maybe he was already, mentally in the transfer portal. And then he didn't look good against Washington, but I think that Michigan game is skewing a lot of people, right? Like that was the number one passing offense in college football over the span of 2 seasons, right? So they did what they did to Terrance Brooks pretty much to everybody they played, right, over a span of 2 years outside of Michigan, right? And Terrance Brooks wasn't the only corner from the University of Texas that didn't look great in that game in the Sugar Bowl. So for the most part, in 13 out of 14 games, he started. And, for the better part of the season, he was really good. Terrance Brooks, I'm talking about. And, I think that he would have been a player that you could have expected to reasonably assume take a jump this year and, be a premier corner in college football. And, Austin Jordan, every time he came in for us, I thought was quality depth, right? And so you needed to at least bring in one player to mitigate those losses, because to me, with those 2 losses, it raised some other questions around the room, right? Jalen Gilbo has injury concerns, and how consistent will he be at the star position if he takes over for Jahdae Barron? How much can you rely on Jahdae Barron at the outside corner position? Can you really rely on Gavin Holmes at a high level when he didn't play well last year, even though he's had a really good spring? How ready are Warren Robinson and Kobe Black to play? Like, there were just so many question marks in the room with the losses of Austin Jordan and Terrance Brooks. You had to go out and get somebody, and I really, really like who they went out and got. We know Steve Sarkisian obviously has a lot of ties to the West Coast, coaching on the West Coast, being from the West Coast. So it makes sense when he's in a bind, he would go get a player from the West Coast. And that player is Jayvion Cole, the 141st overall prospect and 17th ranked corner in the portal, according to the On3 consensus. Now, if you're just listening and you haven't really watched him play, or you haven't, really heard any other analysis over the weekend, you would be saying, damn, like, that's all we could do. 141st overall, 17th ranked corner in the portal. When you look at it On3 individually, I said that was the consensus ranking, right? So it kind of merges everybody's rankings from all the sites, the major sites. On3 individually is a lot higher on him, right? They have him as the number 42 overall player and the number 5 corner, right? And I think that's closer to what he's going to provide at the 40 acres compared to 141st overall and the 17th ranked corner. Listed at 5'11", 170 pounds, from Oakland, California. Started his career at Cal Poly, and then this last season, his sophomore year, played at San Jose State. And statistically, he was a top 20 corner in college football last season, according to Pro Football Focus. So maybe that's why he was ranked a little bit lower, smaller frame, 5'11", 170 pounds, that Gavin Holmes type frame. Also, not playing at the Power 5 level, even though he had 2 games last year against USC and Oregon State. Maybe is a reason he's ranked a little bit lower. But, I think based on the pedigree, he has the ability to step up in competition at the University of Texas and play at a high level. And it could be a situation like Gavin Holmes, where you have him for 2 years, right? With him just finishing his sophomore year, I would think that he would have the opportunity to play his junior and senior year, unless he just explodes this year and decides to transfer somewhere else, or doesn't get any opportunity and decides to transfer somewhere else. I don't think that'll happen. Or, like I said, he just decides to go to the NFL draft after this year. But the more likely scenario is that you're getting a 2-year investment from Jayvion Cole at the 40 acres. And like I said, statistically, a top 20 corner in college football last year, according to Pro Football Focus. His production was elite, posting PFF grades of 86.2 overall, elite, 86.1 run defense, elite. That's really good for a 5'11", 170-pound corner. And then an 83.6 coverage grade. That's what you pay him to do. He's elite at that as well. On 53 targets last year, he allowed only 26 catches, so a little bit less than a 50% completion rate against him, for 297 yards and 1 touchdown. Elite in coverage. 38 tackles. That's really good for a small corner. 10 pass deflections, which was 14th in the nation. So he's always around the ball, getting his hands on the ball, in fact, with 1 sack and 3 interceptions, right? And he had 7 interceptions over his first 2 years of college at 2 different schools, right? And so 10 pass deflections, 14th in the country, 7 interceptions in his first 2 seasons. He's always around the ball, and when he's around the ball, he's able to get his hands on the ball as well. And Inside Texas had really good analysis. They said he has safety eyes, and specifically praised his ability to play in zone coverage, right? And when you can get your hands on 10 balls in a season, really 13, right? Because he caught 3 and deflected 10, 7 interceptions in your first 2 years of college football. That tells me you're always around the ball. You're a ball hawk, and he has the ability to make some spectacular plays at the 40 acres if he keeps that up, or, he gets even better, which we obviously expect him to do. And what does the addition of, Jayvion Cole mean for this room? When you look at it, I think he creates competition with Gavin Holmes for the field spot, right? I think Malik Muhammad is pretty, solidified as that boundary corner. I think Jahdae Barron is going to be moving between the star and the outside. I think you got Jalen Gilbo at the star, And that's where he'll be pretty consistently. So I think the question mark really is at field corner. Is it going to be Gavin Holmes? Is it going to be Jayvion Cole? Is it going to be Jahdae Barron? What do you do at that position? But I think now, right, it at least creates competition and you have another viable option in Jayvion Cole, who's really good last year. It allows Jahdae Barron to rotate between star and most likely boundary corner, right? Now that you have two players who can effectively cover that much field in Jayvion Cole and Gavin Holmes, I think you can rotate Jahdae Barron between the star and the boundary corner where we have Malik Muhammad. And that potentially would allow Manny to play both sides, right? Because I know, if you put Jahdae at boundary, you don't necessarily want to take Malik Muhammad off the field. So maybe you could put Malik Muhammad to the field corner and then Jahdae Barron to the boundary corner with Jalen Gilbo or whoever at star, right? It just gives you options and more versatility to move them around. And then it gives you Jalen Gilbo, Gavin Holmes, or Jayvion Cole, depending on who wins the battle, Warren Robertson and Kobe Black as your primary depth, which is a better position than you were in last week. With the losses of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan, you had to rely on Warren Robertson and Kobe Black as a high level this year. Now it seems like they're your third or fourth corner off the bench. And with them having no experience, that's probably where you want them, right? So a really good pickup. I think with Jayvion Cole, like I said, statistically a top 20 corner in college football last year. I think the only question marks are his size and, who his production was against. But I think he has a chance to be a really good football player for us at the 40 acres, right? And I think they've done a really good job of mitigating the losses of Terrance Brooks and Austin Jordan. Do we need another corner? Only they can answer that. I'm not sure, but we needed at least one, and they went out and got that one. So kudos to Steve Sarkisian, kudos to Terry Joseph. There's been a lot of heat on him lately, and just the entire staff for going out and getting a high-level football player and continuing to attack our needs and making sure we have the best chance to go out and compete at a high level. Adapt or die. Steve Sarkisian and his staff have adapted, and that's the reason that the University of Texas is one of the premier programs in college football once again. I kind of left a cliffhanger there. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll get into the Texas baseball team, who is hot right now, winning 5 of their last 6 games. Who do I think I am? Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so we're talking about the Texas baseball team. And the last time I spoke about them on the podcast, I believe, was the Houston series, where they lost the first game, won the second game, and then were down big in the third game, but came back and win it to win the series. And I think that was the last time I talked about them on the podcast. So I know they just had this recent series against Oklahoma State Cowboys. And then before that, they played on Tuesday night against, let me look at my notes, Sam Houston State. And they beat Sam Houston State 16-9 on Tuesday, and then took 2 out of 3 this weekend against Oklahoma State in the dish. They're 30-19 on the season, winners of 5 of their last 6 games, and winners of 4 consecutive series. So, the standard for the Texas baseball team is always high. The Omaha Horns, you expect to get to a super regional College World Series every year, and you expect to be in a position to at least compete, right, for a championship, right? You never should go into a season at the University of Texas with this baseball team and say we don't have a chance to win it all, right? And I think it's the same thing for the football team, and hopefully we can get the basketball team there, at a certain point, right? But baseball and football at the University of Texas, it should be championship or bust every season, right? Now, of course, what Texas went through over the last, 10 years, we weren't able to say that, right? You had to clean up some things and get back right. But now we're back in the position where it should be championship or bust every season, either conference or national, and same thing with the college baseball team. So they're playing at that level right now. We didn't see it at the beginning of the season. A lot of inconsistencies, still some inconsistencies, but you'll take 5 out of 6 in every level of baseball, right? From Pee-wee to the majors, right? To the show. It's really hard to succeed consistently at a high level in baseball, and 5 out of 6 is about the best you can do aside from 6 out of 6, right? So going to the Oklahoma State series on Friday, Texas won 7-5. Oklahoma State took a 1-0 lead in the second inning with an infield single and a double to bring around the runner to score, and 3 straight ground outs by Max Grubbs thankfully kept the score at 1-0. Texas would immediately tie it with an RBI single in the bottom of the second, tying the game at 1-1. But in the top of the third, Max Grubbs gave up 2 homers, and Oklahoma State took a 4-1 lead heading into the bottom of the third. But once again, the Longhorns, right, resilient, battled right back and tied the game in the same inning. 3 singles and a double in the bottom of the third tied the game at 4-4. So 3 runs in the top of the third allowed, 3 runs scored in the bottom of the third. I guess you'll take it, right? Oklahoma State would take a 5-4 lead in the seventh, but Texas once again showing their resiliency, followed that up by getting 2 runs in the bottom of the seventh to make it 6-5. This was a result of a single, a double, an intentional walk, a hit by a pitch, and a sacrifice fly. So damn near everything you can do on the offensive end, they did in the bottom of the seventh inning to make it 6-5. And then Gasparino hit a solo homer in the eighth to make it 7-5. And that was your final score. On Saturday, Texas came back and won 6-3, clinching a series win, winning the first 2 games of the series at home. Max Bellew got the scoring started with a 2-run double in the first inning to give Texas a 2-0 lead. Oklahoma State would load the bases in the fifth, but could only muster 1 run from it. So Texas entered the sixth with a 2-1 lead after the Cowboys loaded the bases. However, the Longhorns were unable to score after the first inning, so the Cowboys were able to tie the game in the seventh with an RBI double, 2-out RBI double, locking the score at 2 apiece going into the eighth. The top of the seventh, going into the bottom of the seventh. But once again, Texas responded immediately, this time taking a 3-2 lead on an RBI ground out in the same inning. The Cowboys came back in the top of the eighth, tying it once again, making it 3-3. Just a herky-jerky series the first 2 games for sure. But the Longhorns, once again, showing resiliency and responding right away, put the game away in the bottom of the eighth. All 3 runs coming with 2 outs to make the final score 6-3. The Longhorns clinched the series with 1 game to go. But as you know, if you're a baseball fan, really hard to sweep a team, really hard to beat a team 3 times or 4 times. And unfortunately, Texas was unable to do so. And not only did they lose yesterday, this is one of those demoralizing type losses where it could kind of crush the momentum of the 5 wins you had before that, right? You can still look at it as 5 out of 6. We're hitting on all cylinders. We're playing our best baseball right now. But the type of loss they had yesterday, I don't even think the score does it justice, is also the type of loss that could reverse that momentum, right? So hopefully we see moving forward, right, more of the team that won 5 straight and not the team we saw yesterday. When you look at it, Texas could only score 2 runs on the day after scoring 13 runs in the first 2 games. Both of those runs coming on 2 solo homers at the end of the game. Didn't really change the game flow or, move the needle at all. Oklahoma State scored their 7 runs on 2 homers, an RBI double, a bases loaded walk. That should never happen. And a 2-run single in the 7th. The offense for Texas, after 13 runs in the first 2 games, only had 2 runs and 4 hits in this game compared to 10 for the Cowboys. And the pitching staff allowed 9 walks, and LBJ didn't make it through 5 innings. So, like I said, that sounds a lot worse than a 7-2 baseball game. And that's the type of baseball game that, could really demoralize you, right? 9 walks from your pitching staff, offense only getting 4 hits. Hopefully you're able to flush it and move on and be that baseball team once again that had 5 in a row coming into that game. But that's also the type of game that could have you questioning things. And this is not the type of season that you want to be questioning things. So, like I said, you'll take 5 out of 6 at every level of baseball, from Pee Wee to the majors. And hopefully they continue that 5 out of 6 momentum throughout the rest of the season, because playing your best baseball at this point could propel them to playing or being one of the last teams standing when it's all said and done. A quick word from our sponsors, and then my 5 biggest takeaways from my conversation with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus last week. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Hold on, let me find. Maybe I closed it out. Okay, just give me a second. This is my second time recording this. I've had really bad luck, and the whole second half of the episode did not record. So this is my second time recording this. I think that's why I closed it out. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on. All right. My 5 biggest takeaways from my conversation with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus. I still think if you can get the opportunity to go back and listen to it, these 5 takeaways might do it justice. It might not, right? Because he dropped a lot of gems and he talked for 30 minutes, right? So I don't know if I can sum up everything he said in 30 minutes, but just blessed to be able to be in a position to even have anybody from Pro Football Focus come on. And, like I said, just really good information about the orange and white game. Texas going into the 2024 season, how he views us as a football team, how he views them as a football team, right? I'm not on it. And then just, reacting to the landing spots and what happened in the draft of our 11 players taken, which was a record for a 7-round NFL draft for the Texas Longhorns. My first takeaway was he talked about Quinn Ewers in terms of his position in the 2025 NFL draft. And he said individually or specifically to him, he has Quinn Ewers ranked as quarterback 3 in this class right now, right? Behind Shedeur Sanders, who was his number 1 quarterback, and Carson Beck from Georgia, who is his number 2 quarterback. Now, obviously, this is fluid. They still all have another year of college football to play. And right now, Quinn Ewers is his number 3, right? Probably number 2 on some other boards, number 1 on some other boards, has a chance to be the number 1 consensus quarterback with his play going into the 2025 NFL draft, right? Shedeur Sanders is the betting favorite currently to go number 1 overall. And I think when you look at the tape and when you look at him in terms of a football player, there's a lot to like, right? You could certainly project him as a future franchise quarterback in the National Football League. Now, I know every time Deion Sanders or Shedeur Sanders opens his mouth, especially recently on Twitter about that kid that transferred out, right? It could rub people a lot, the wrong way. And I definitely know, there's some people that are rooting against Deion and Shedeur because of the way that they carry themselves, right? And I don't have anything against that, right? Like, you like who you like, you don't like who you don't like, right? And they definitely carry themselves as if they don't care who likes them or who doesn't like them, right? But I think in terms of the football, he's a really good football player. And I think that tape-wise, he could be a top 5 pick right now, at the end of the day, it's more than about football or trusting somebody to be your franchise quarterback. So I think if he drops in the draft for any reason, it'll be off the field and not what he does on the field, right? I could perfectly see why you would have him as the best quarterback going into the season in college football. He's a really talented football player. And then Carson Beck, I haven't seen a ton of him, but I mean, they went undefeated in the regular season, seamless transition from Stetson Bennett, and 2 of his pass catchers went in the top 40 of the draft. So he did a really good job of getting them the ball. And, I think we'll see, what he has this year, especially on October 19th against, Texas. And then I think Quinn Ewers is in the same boat. So that's a mammoth matchup on October 19th between Texas and Georgia. When's the last time in college football we saw arguably the 2 best prospects at that position in college football go against each other in the regular season? I mean, that game could determine the Heisman. It could determine, the conference championship. Seed in the playoffs. I mean, that game could just determine so much who gets drafted earlier, right? I mean, because they're going to be going head to head in some sense. So just a really huge game on October 19th between Texas and Georgia, similarly between Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers. And when you look at it, they just lost these pass catchers to the National Football League. Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, JT Sanders, and Jordan Whittington. So that's going to be a crazy game this year with a ton of firepower. But imagine if they would have played the game in 2023. Sheesh, right? Crazy names on offense and defense. And we're going to see some crazy ones this year. But like I said, a mammoth matchup between Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers that could have a ton of implications that go past who wins the game on that day. Second takeaway is he had Xavier Worthy as a 2nd-round pick, but thought that the Chiefs were the best fit, so it made sense for him to go in the 1st round when he did. Talked about some drops with Xavier Worthy. I did explain some of those with the hand injury his sophomore year, but there also were some other drops on tape where his hand wasn't hurt. And just an inability, I thought, or a lack of, a ton of him playing through contact, right? He's 165 pounds, 170 soaking wet. So that's probably not ever going to be a huge strength for him, unless he gains a bunch of weight playing through contact. But, that's something that you're going to have to rely on from a player you draft in the first round who's going to somewhat be your number one wide receiver, right? You need him to go up and make those tough contested catches, right? And so that's something that Xavier Worthy is going to have to develop an ability to do at the National Football League level. But I think that's why Max Chadwick has had him as a second round pick. But I thought going to the Chiefs was a first round type of fit for him, right? You're catching passes from arguably the greatest quarterback to ever throw a football. We know the history of Andy Reid and working with really fast receivers and Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, the list goes on and on. He knows what to do with speed. And so I think, he definitely knows what to do with Xavier Worthy. And then you get really good mentorship from Travis Kelce, who's one of the best to ever do it in terms of being a pass catcher. So really good fit for Xavier Worthy. Thought he was a second round pick in terms of the tape, but it was a first round fit going to the Chiefs. He thought JT Sanders still should have been a second round pick. This is the third takeaway, despite the poor testing. The poor testing obviously being the 4.7, 4.40 at the combine. He followed that up in his second attempt with a 4.69, which I still thought that was low for a player of JT Sanders' caliber and athleticism. And then at the pro day, only 8 reps on the bench press, which is abysmal. I mean, let's be honest. So Keelan Robinson put up over 20, and you're an inline tight end, right? 8 reps on 225, just not great at all. Like abysmal, like I said, just being honest. But the tape screamed that he was a really good football player. And sometimes, obviously you don't want to just poo-poo, right? Like anything that happens in the process. But sometimes we can overrate what happens in shorts, so much so that we start to kind of devalue the tape a little bit and overvalue what they do at the combine and the pro day, which makes no sense, right? And so I, completely agree with Max Chadwick, and I love the way that he broke that down. That on the tape, Jayvion Sanders was always a second round pick or better. But I think the testing made people feel like he was a fourth round pick, and that potentially could be a steal for the Carolina Panthers. And I also like the destination, right? It's a lot of young players trying to figure it out, but it's a really good pass catcher for Bryce Young. They got Xavier Leggett, the wide receiver as well. They got Jonathan Brooks, right, who I think, will be in the conversation for one of the best running backs in the league in a few years. Got some familiarity there with Jatavian Sanders and then Deshaun Jameson on defense as well. So I think it's a great spot for JT Sanders. I think he's going to have some accountability there, and I think he'll be able to play at a high level. Adonai Mitchell was an absolute steal at the 52nd pick. I thought that. Max Chadwick thought that. And Chris Ballard from the Indianapolis Colts thought that. And he came out and said it was BS, everything that came out about Adonai Mitchell, that, more than likely dropped his draft stock and had him fall to the 52nd pick. And Max Chadwick agreed that a lot of that stuff that came out about Adonai Mitchell seemed like BS as well. It did not seem representative of his character that we've heard about at Georgia or Texas, right? None of that came out until right before the draft, and it more than likely cost Adonai Mitchell some money. He did talk about, there being lack of effort at times, maybe, or, kind of half stepping through routes at times when he's not the primary receiver, even sometimes when he is the primary receiver. Adonai Mitchell just not going 100% on every rep probably is his biggest question mark. But you're talking about a receiver at 6'2", 208 pounds with a 4.3, 4.40 who raised his game in the biggest moments in college, and he played in a lot of them. That's the number one wide receiver to me, and I think he can be a really good 1A, 1B to Michael Pittman for the Indianapolis Colts, playing with what could be a young superstar in Anthony Richardson. And then the last thing is you pick Jonathan Brooks. I asked him who he thought out of the 11 players drafted from the University of Texas would have the best career. He gave us 2 answers. The first one was Byron Murphy, which makes sense. He was the first player drafted, right? So obviously, if there were betting odds on it, Byron Murphy would have, probably the safest odds because he was the 16th overall pick, and there are some Aaron Donald comparisons there. But I picked Jonathan Brooks, and he picked Jonathan Brooks, right? I think when you look at it, it's crazy that at one point he was running back 3 at the 40 acres, and then this year he tore his ACL and still went 46th overall in an NFL where the running back is devalued, right? Where even though every great team has a great running game. So I don't get how the running back is devalued. I guess paying running backs high level money is devalued, but having a really good running game is not, right? So I guess it's like now we just want 3 really cheap running backs instead of having one really talented, overpaid running back, I guess, right? Good football players are good football players. Either way, I think Jonathan Brooks, like I said, he has everything, right? I mean, the speed, power, contact balance, vision, patience, the ability to catch the ball, the ability to make people miss, the ability to break tackles. He literally has it all, right? And he went 46th overall coming off an ACL tear, which makes me think he probably goes one of the first few picks of the second round, or maybe even sneaks into the first round with what he put on tape last year. And like I said, you know what I mean? He did have a ton of, touches in high school, but in college, he sat behind Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, and for 2 games, Cedric Baxter, right? And then he tore his ACL his 10th game of the season. So there's not a ton of tread on the tires. If he bounces back from the ACL injury, he should be fresh for his first few years in the National Football League. And like I said, I think he'll be in all-pro conversations sooner than later. And I think he'll be in best running back in the league conversations sooner or later. So if I had to put my money on one player out of the 11 drafted from the Texas Longhorns to have the best National Football League career, it would be Jonathan Brooks. But obviously I'm biased, I'm burnt orange glasses on. I'm hoping all 11 of them end up, as the best players in the league at their position and play for a really, really long time and make generational wealth for their families. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hogan. Peace.